Live.
Hello.
We
Hello,
have
hello.
Marcus, Jesse, and me here today. So, Marcus is the host. I am welcoming everybody. Our guest is Jesse Diaz today to do part two of the
Ooh.
intro to him. So, introed what we're doing, and now we're going to intro Jesse.
Nice.
So, Marcus, take it away.
Well, hello, hello. Thank you very much, Krista. We'd like to welcome you guys back to Level Up Monday night session. We're so glad to have you. We would like, Krista, if this is okay, to start off with a trivia question.
I'm down.
You're down. All right. In the spirit of politics, which is something we will cover this evening,
Wait, is this just for me?
it's well, actually, I'm sorry. It's for both of you guys.
Okay.
So, what are
Um,
the rules?
the rules.
I'm like, is this a game? What are the rules? I need to know. Do I care about this or not yet?
Mm,
We'll find out. Just ask the question.
yeah. All right.
But what
So,
are the rules? How do we answer? Do we raise our hand? Do we yell
so
it out?
basically, I will read the question. It will be multiple choice. I'll read the question and then I will give you the answers at any time. Either of you can raise your hand. I will stop and say your name and wait for your answer.
Cool.
All right.
Let's
All
do it.
right. Let's do it. All right. In the spirit of politics, what was the year in which the United States of America officially became a nation? A. 1779, B. 1776, C. 1783, or D. 1812? Yes, Krista.
1776?
Wrong.
That's
Jesse, do
embarrassing.
you have an
Okay,
answer,
what?
sir?
I'm on July 4th,
I'm gonna
1776.
go with was it B? 1779?
No,
No.
it is
83.
actually C. 1783.
Okay.
The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783 by King George of Great Britain, which officially ended the Revolutionary War and
That's right.
recognized the United States as a free and independent nation. Although the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, we didn't actually become a nation
That's true.
officially until 1783.
I remember now. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really glad
I
to
knew it was
learn that
around there.
knowledge.
cool beans. Krista, is this the part where I hand it back over to you?
um, well, basically, this is the part where we hand it over to Jesse
Ah,
because
okay.
as we've introduced people and then now we're diving deeper into what we're doing. The thing that we're doing is built by the background of what built the people that are a part of it. So
Okay.
I would love to know, what made Jesse interested in building this, voice of the people project, whatever it looks like, whatever it's going to be, the heart
Yep.
behind it. Let's talk to the people about it because I want to know everything.
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me back on here. Trying to think back to our first recording. We talked a little bit about my background, then we talked a little bit about how I met Rachel, and we spent more time with that, and then we kind of kept going. But I feel like there were a few parts that kind of were missed because we only had so much time. But I think it'll kind of give a context to kind of where I'm coming from, because I feel like when we're talking about getting people together and talking about complex issues, whether it be politics or church related or relationships or whatever. Um, Sometimes what I've found is that you have to really kind of get to know the person, because the person, they see and experience life now based on what they've been through, their experience, their past, it could be their past traumas, their past experiences, past relationships. And so when you come to the table, they already have a certain lens that they're speaking from. And I feel like whenever I talk to people, I've had several people tell me like, "Wow, that's a very unique experience that you have," and
Mhm.
to not only have gone through that, but then to also come on the other side and be very passionate. So I think sometimes things can happen in our lives, and sometimes it can take us in a downward spiral, or sometimes it can for a little bit, but then sometimes you make certain decisions or whatever intervention from a friend or God or whatever, and then it makes you like it transforms you, you know. Um, but for me, just to kind of, I'm just going to kind of start from the very beginning. But I think I mentioned it last time. So obviously, my parents came to the U.S. In the late '60s, got married, became U.S. citizens. So me and my two brothers, we grew up in Nebraska. And so from the from like the furthest memory I can think of, um, we would go to church every Sunday. My parents were raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic. But from as far as I can remember, both of my parents actually went to different churches. And so my dad, was still continuing in the Catholic faith, and then my mom started to go into the Jehovah's Witness faith, and that happened around the time, I don't know. I have to ask her exactly, but somewhere when I was very very young. So I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years old, something like that, maybe even a little earlier. But so I grew up with both parents going to different churches. And if you know anything about those churches, they're both very much, well, this is the true church. It's like, this is the place. If you want to go, if you want to be in the in crowd, then come join us. And so what I saw that as a child, again through the eyes of a child, was very much like, well, there was just a lot of I was confused because I thought, as a child, you don't really know much about the Bible. But when you hear two people and two different narratives of like, oh, we have the truth and the Bible is clear, what the truth is. But they both live very different lives. They're the things that they were dedicated to were very different. And so as
Did
a
you
child,
mention what the 2 religions were? You said you grew up
yes.
Catholic,
Uh-huh.
but the other religion.
Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I grew up with just kind of I think from what I can remember going through that, and in my mind, I think I just kind of came to a conclusion like, well, the Bible's it's a it's a hard book to understand. Everybody has their own interpretation. So it's no wonder there's so many denominations, blah blah blah. And then when I got to, so I was public schooled all the way until high school, and then when my parents got divorced because of religious differences, I mean that was kind of really one of the main things that created that separation. I even went to an all boys Catholic school, which was uh, in one way it was really very good for me. But as far as like learning the Bible, we never really had classes about the Bible. Like there was verses here and there in some of our books and some of our classes, but it wasn't until I was 18 and went to college that I actually read the Bible. And so, um, and so that was kind of how I grew up with that. Is oh yeah. So that was really kind of what I was thinking. Like, well, it's something that's very confusing. Everybody has different interpretations. That's why there's so many different denominations. And so, but it wasn't until I got to college and actually, read the Bible for the first time, and started to see like, oh wow, like these are actually verses. There are lots of things in here that I was never shown, and I was like, I felt a lot of different things, but I do remember feeling at one point I was like, I felt kind of robbed, like, oh, I was going to church every Sunday. I was going to what's called CCD, which is like our Wednesday night is when the kids would come and do their Sunday school part. So I did that, but and not to say I never, like, when I say I never read the Bible, I never like picked up a Bible and opened it and read it. We had lessons that had verses and things like that, But as we all know, we can take any verse and we can read lots of stories, but it really didn't get into the kind of the meat of what makes one church different from another.
Mhm.
Um, but I wanted to share that because that was really kind of my first taste of what it meant to have different narratives. And so that's why I wanted to touch on that first. And then when I got and then fast forward until my college years, um, I did get married when I was 23, the first time I got married. And I got married in the church that I was a part of when I joined when I was in college. Um, and things were good, things were great. Things were, I was basically, we had two boys and raising them and things like that. And then later on is when I joined the Air Force. Um, and so, but um, it wasn't, it was, but even in that church experience, I kind of started to see over time that sometimes you had people that would leave the church and sometimes they wouldn't give you an explanation of why they left. Um, but sometimes the minister would say, "Oh, they may not say anything," or sometimes they'll be like, "Well, they just weren't committed or whatever." But for the most part, I never really got a full story of why people would leave, you know. But it wasn't until like much much later when I was working in Kansas that you know I decided to go visit a different church, and then that was and this was by about 10 years ago in 2015. um, and that opened up some conversations with certain people in leadership, and it was just like, you know a lot of the people that I was going to church with had no problem with it, but it was kind of like the leadership that was having a problem. And at this point in the game, we're just like, we just want to visit, like we're not leaving the church, we're not saying anything like that, we're just visiting. um so long story short, like, we just really had some really tough discussions with some of the leadership, the people that were in kind of in leadership, and they just did not like us deciding to even visit another church, up until the point where after 3 months later, we finally decided, like, you know what, it's going to be hard to be a member of both churches anyway. And so we decided, okay, let's just go to one. And so we ended up going to the other one that we were starting to visit. And that just kind of created just some different dynamics with some friends from our old church. Not everybody, but that was kind of the that was kind of the church culture back then, is that you just don't leave. Like, that's just not something you do. Um, but I feel like it's one of those things where as you grow up, you start to like realize that certain things just don't seem right. Like, why was it taboo to leave? Why was it that we couldn't visit another church? Why was this? Why was that? And when you're in a church culture or a certain culture, you may not know all the answers to kind of all the ins and outs of why the church culture is the way it is. And sometimes you have to kind of go through some things and you look back and you're like, oh, okay, now I understand. Sometimes it's through experiences, sometimes it's through relationships, and sometimes it's just through doing some research. Like, and then so that's what I did 10 years ago. I decided to do kind of like, okay, Jesse, I want to go on this quest and really learn the roots of the church I belong. And so it led to, the roots of the restoration movement, how that started, where the splits came with that, um, and really getting to the point of where, like, okay, why did those people in the 1800s in this country, like, why they wanted to go back to the Bible, and they wanted to kind of find, be part of a church that was like, it started off as a unity movement actually, and then later on, their one of their slogans was, we speak where the Bible speaks and we're silent where we're silent. Well, even that slogan had divisions because there were people that thought, well, does the silence mean permission, or does it mean exclusion, that you can't do it because the Bible doesn't say it, because it's silent? And so that created more division. And so the three divisions that you see up to now, you'll see the Church of Christ, the Christian Church, and the Disciples of Christ. And so now we're talking early 1800s all the way to now to 2025. And I kid you not, I did lots of research. I'm talking like read books, watch videos, talk to teachers, talk to ministers. You know, I did a lot, and a lot of this also happened like in the times like during my divorce, during COVID. My kids are older, so I had a lot of free time and downtime to do this stuff. Now I wouldn't be able to do this if obviously if I was chasing around little kids and maybe I just didn't have as much time. But again, this is another example of just following a different narrative. And so this actually, once we left the church, that other church, and joined another church, you could tell, like I was sharing with Krista, I went from a church that was like maybe like it had like 110 people or so, something like that. That was more of a structured type of church. And then I went to another one that was like attendance of like a little bit over 1,000 people, to where, I mean, it's very easy. Like if you don't show up on Sunday, you know, probably no one's really going to know. But it really, but I feel like I learned a lot through those experiences, and also having been in the Air Force and having lived in different states as well. I got a little bit of taste of Kansas and Virginia and California, and I'd mentioned before, the Air Force took me to Germany and Florida, and so, and then also in Florida, we did some church hopping as well, because that's one of the things I really liked about the military. One of the many things is that when you move, you have to restart. You got to restart your friendships. You got to restart what school did the kids go to? What were your friends like? And it was a challenge, especially the first time moving. Well, the first time was moving to Germany because that was a huge challenge. But then moving to Florida, I was like, it was weird because like I wanted to stay overseas because I really enjoyed it. And at first I was like, "Oh, we're going overseas?" Like, "Oh my gosh." So it's crazy what happens in 4 years. Like um the thing that you're afraid about, you're excited about. But um so anyways, I don't want to go off topic, but so eventually I won't share too many specifics, but then because of that movement of going from one church to another, it really I think it forced me and my ex to really define God for ourselves. Um and not through a church interpretation, not through a denomination, but really what we thought, God was. And so it was good. Like it wasn't like I had to like totally relearn the Bible and, hey, who's Jesus? But there are some key specific things, because if a culture is telling you, okay, you can't even go visit this church, I had to really kind of seek some things. Um so anyways, long story short, that really kind of like, I could really slowly start to see, and again, hindsight's 2020 when you look back.
Mhm.
But my ex, I'll just say my ex chose a different path, and that path did not involve me, did not involve the church we were attending, it didn't involve a lot of different things. And so I felt like it was kind of like, huh, wow, this is very, I wasn't expecting this. And so going through a divorce like is horrible. It's horrible. I was married for 20 years. And also, to add a little bit more context, like that was actually also my first relationship. In the church when I was in college, they did do a good job of like really encouraging encouragement dates and things like that. So for someone who didn't go on dates in high school, I joined this church. I'm like, wow, there's sisters here I can ask on a date every single weekend. So I was like, this is perfect. So my dating experience was in college, not in high school. I think I went on one blind date, and then I took somebody to prom that I really didn't know, and then I was just so busy
Yeah,
in
I wasn't allowed to
school.
date in high school.
Yeah, my high school experience was very very different because I was going because my parents had just gotten divorced, and so my focus was just school, homework, uh, working at Pizza Hut, uh, cross country, track. Like I was just busy, and that's another thing too I liked about that private high school was that it really called me to a higher level with schoolwork because like
Mhm.
everybody around me was so super smart, 4.0 average, and I'm just like public school guy here. I'm like I need to step up my game, so I really worked for super super hard. But I liked how I went through that experience because it did develop some core and foundational things about me and my character that bled into my college years, if that makes sense. So, do you have any questions so far? Because I can keep going.
I do have one, Jesse. I'm thinking, a kid entering high school, you must have been about what, 14, 15 years
Mhm.
old, I guess. Your parents, going through a divorce or just having been divorced. I'm thinking that had to be pretty tough for uh, a young man in his mid-teens.
Yeah, yeah, it was hard. And
And
I didn't, and I,
religion-wise too, in a
Yeah,
split religion belief household,
absolutely.
there's that factor as well.
yeah, and it's kind of funny because like I won't get into the details, but there were two traumatic things that happened in my childhood that involved my parents. Um, and us being the kids, we're like in the middle of it, so we don't,
Mm. Mhm.
like there was one point where, am I still going to be in the U.S. like
Yeah.
because they were like one was thinking about maybe going back to Mexico to be by family, and then the other
Mhm.
one didn't, and I won't get into that because I don't, I do, I do want to say, for the record, I do respect my parents. I do love them, but I think it's one of those things where, we as people and as parents and as citizens, we do our best with what we
Mhm.
know.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they did their best with what they knew at the time.
Yeah. And we'll touch on this towards the end because I know it'll be a question, but when it talks about the title level up, I think to me it's really about um, leveling up our lives to not just what we know or what we think we know, but one thing that I learned even in the military is that we all have blind spots, you know, like it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter all the experience that, I've had living in different parts of, the country, and like having been deployed to the Middle East, that was a very good experience. I have a lot of experience, but I mean, I'm not God. God's the all knowing, and so I think just being a humble person and just trying to learn as much as you can because you
Sure.
don't know when your last day is going to be. And I think that's what I learned um, during 2020. So my divorce ended in 2020. Um, she asked for it, and so yeah. So from going to my very first relationship, being married for 20 years, and then not and then going through all that. Well, then funny because 2020, that's we all know that's when COVID hit. And then as my kids are starting to graduate high school, my youngest had graduated the year before. Yeah, the year before. So he was still with me. So it was just me and him. And but then like a couple of weeks before COVID hit, he had moved out because both of my boys became roommates in an apartment. And so I was living by myself for the very, very first time. In college,
That's so
I
hard.
always had roommates. I always lived with somebody. And so to go from having a house full of people with the dog and the cat, and even my ex-mother-in-law was with us, to in like a matter of 2 years, all by myself. It was me and the cat. And
Yeah,
so
that's a lot at once.
Yeah.
yeah. And oh, and also, by the way, it's
You have to,
COVID
like, process
because
your thoughts and heal.
yeah. So really give me a lot of time to really, I mean, I've been through some challenging things again, like I shared, like with my parents, their divorce, and then having gone through the military. I mean, there's some challenging things there, but man, nothing compares to having to go through a divorce. And so, um, like, I didn't even have time to like really care about COVID. Like, I saw it on TV and I knew it was happening and I knew how to wear a mask and all this different stuff. But to me, that was secondary to everything I was going through. But it was very interesting how all those things kind of aligned because living by myself, um, and then at work, they kept changing the thing where like, oh, only come to work 3 days a week. And then
Mhm.
the following week, oh, only come 2 days. And then it changed, oh, only come one day. Okay, just work from home. So I can't go visit my friends. I can't go to work. Can't go to church. Can't really hang out with my kids. Like, 'cause it was very much like everything was stripped away. I felt like Job, you know?
Yeah, like,
And so,
lockdown life was like the
Yeah.
Twilight Zone, like,
yeah.
what in the
But I,
world?
but even from like talking to you guys and other people, like, during COVID and a little bit after COVID, I feel like everybody kind of went through something similar. They were isolated, or it affected their job. It affected my older son's job because he was like an entertainment, business and stuff like that. And so I think it affected somebody, in some form or fashion. But I feel like in a lot of ways it was kind of like hitting the reset button. And I think I would
Mhm.
assume that God probably used that time to get people focused and centered of what's important. At least that's what I did. You know, I kind of took this traumatic experience during COVID and my divorce, and I would remember like, well, I had to kept telling myself like, well, I've been through hard stuff before. I've been through my parents' divorce and all that stuff that happened. Um, so, and then I had to really think about, okay, what kind of person am I going to be? Because I'm no longer Jesse the married person. I'm no longer, I mean, obviously I'm always going to be a parent, but once the kids move out of the house, it's Jesse with no kids in the house.
Right.
I felt it's kind of like the feeling of going to a foreign country and you don't know the language. Or it's another analogy would be like you've been in the pool for so long and you step out of the pool and you're freezing,
Please.
It's like, oh my gosh, like you're freaking out. Those are the best two analogies I can. It was very, very awkward. Very awkward to be one way and to be in a certain state for so long, and then all of a sudden nope, you're not married. Nope, kids are gone. And so yeah, it was really good. I mean, looking back, it's kind of like it was. I just used that time to really pray to God and just really examine myself and just kind of look toward the future and be like, okay, if I'm going to stick around in this world, um, what kind of person do I want to be? Am I going to get married again? I don't know. Am I going to stay in the military? Yeah, that's the plan. I still have a few more years left. But what's going to happen after that? And so I started to think more about the future and where I can see myself going. And through lots of counseling, I did take advantage of the counseling that the military offers, um, which is super helpful. So anybody that's going through a hard time, do the counseling. Like, find somebody. Not all the counselors I saw were great, but some of them were really, really good.
And this
So
is for active military, or do they offer this for veterans too?
uh, well, yeah, for veterans too. Yeah, I think for veterans you'd have to go through the VA.
Mhm, yeah, but if
Yeah,
it's offered, that's, like, a really good resource
yeah,
to know about.
yeah. But for active duty, yeah, they have that,
Yeah.
option. And at the very least, every base has a base chaplain too, so that's always somebody that you can talk to. Um, so, anyways, I just wanted to kind of go through that, and then, um, but to kind of give a kind of the end of the story was that I was able to meet my now wife Rachel, you know, about several years after that whole experience. And so, she's amazing. And we went, that's how I got to know Krista, was through that other group, for singles. And so you just never know what God has in store. But I met her like right around the time where I was just ready to just to be happy no matter what came my way, whether I
Mhm.
was married or single. And I really started to, see myself like really volunteering with different things and to really just be the best person that I could be and just be happy. Because again, we're not, and I know it's easier said than done. And it did take years of, talking and counseling and praying and all that stuff. But um so that's the really kind of the story of healing that I have, is that, you know, stay focused, don't give up, know who you are, know why you're here. Because I think when we lose sight of those things, then we kind of lose our purpose of why are we even here?
Yeah.
Like, why am I waking? And then those are the questions I had, like, why am I waking up today?
Yeah.
Before it's like, oh, I have to wake up because I got to go to work, I got to take care of the kids, I got to be a husband, I got to. All that was gone,
Right.
especially during COVID. No wife, no kids, no work. I mean, yes, I was employed, but going to work once a week didn't quite feel the same.
Yeah. Or
So it
not
was
at all.
very, very weird time. But
Yeah, it sounds like he had a little bit of a pursuit of purpose, if you will, going, or thought process going.
yeah, yeah. So yeah.
But let me ask you this, Jesse, if I may. So given your story, having been through a divorce with your parents, a divorce of your own, um, and it sounds like you went through some of a what of a wilderness experience, if you will, um, during the COVID years, which I think a few of us can attest to that. But
Hmm.
um, when it comes to level up in the work that you're doing now, with regards to the political stance of our country, how did how did your, I guess, your background and what you've been through personally, how did it bring you to this point?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like, you know, with experience and with time and with age, um, there's a lot of different things that you go through. And so I think as you're able to go through those battles and, in my mind, come out victorious. And when I say victorious, I don't mean like I got everything I wanted, look at me.
Right.
But it was more of, I was able to get through it and still be, for one, still alive, you know, and to still be content, to be striving to be joyful, and to still be connected to the church, like my this during that whole time, my faith, it was never like, I never had a moment like, oh, I don't know if I believe in God anymore and all that stuff. Like, that never entered my mind once. It was more of like, gosh, like, this stuff happens to other people, you see it on TV and you read about it. Oh, but then it happens. Then it finally happened to me. Like, it's like, what, Um, and I think as the years go by and you see different things on TV and you start to see and hear different conversations, around you, and it's like, wow, like, people are kind of getting divided over things, and then it
Mhm.
makes you want to pay attention. Like, okay, why? And so you start listening into different conversations at your workplace or at church, your neighbors or family, whoever. And then maybe you might listen to a podcast or two or a YouTube thing or whatever. But then you see it all the time, and then you start slowly seeing how divided we are as a nation,
Mhm.
and then it just makes you think like, wow, how did we get here? Like, I never was a big political type of person. Like, it was cool to see it on TV and with with elections and the debates. Like, the debates were always kind of cool, but I don't think I've ever seen it to where it was this so bipolarized, like
Yeah.
I remember when I first joined the military, like after, September 11th, like I remember watching the TV and, you know, um, representatives from both sides were in front of the White House,
Hmm.
singing. And I just remember that feeling of we are together. It was, in a way, it was kind of like us versus them. Us being Americans, didn't matter what party you were. And it's like let's fight the enemy kind of mentality.
But
Now,
I also
25 years.
remember, like, England. I remember footage of England mourning with us the
Yeah,
week of September 11th,
yeah,
Yes.
them, like, standing with American flags
Hmm.
in armies of people mourning with the US. I remember that and being surprised, and my mom was like, "Despite the history, we are allies. We are allies." Despite, that and how America
yeah,
came to exist and all of that, we are friends. And I realized, what she meant by watching it happen on September 11th
yeah,
and the weeks that followed. Like, it's not us against them
yeah,
even, it is just like, where are we now? How did we fall this far? Because
yeah,
even this nation doesn't stand together
yeah,
as
Yeah.
one, much less other nations standing with us, because we're in solidarity already. Like, we're not even in solidarity.
Right.
And I don't know who's
yeah,
standing with us if we're not strong. We're vulnerable for attack. So we've come to such a place as this for a
yeah.
reason. I
And
want to
going back,
unpack it.
yeah, going back to the kind of the church spiritual division that I experienced, as a child and growing up, and then and within the different churches I've been a part of. Um, there's different uh, bits of history that you start to see, because I found this one very, very cool. Um, it wasn't so much a YouTube channel, but this guy was getting his doctorate in the Restoration movement, and he had like 25 videos, and they're all like an hour long. Well, guess who listened to all of them? I was
Nerdy
taking
McNerdy Jesse.
I was taking notes. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm looking for, because I'm very much like I'm a very much I want to get to the bottom. Like in the Air Force, I was intel, and so I was surrounded by people thinking that way. And you have to have credibility if you're going to be doing a brief or
Sure.
talking to somebody, to an officer, or you're going to be, I mean, there's just so much that I was just in that environment for 15 years. And so I got to, and then also being a parent, you learn so much about being a parent. You learn um, that you don't know everything. And then as you teach your kids, you get into situations where, like, wow, like I just went through an experience with my son, and like I'm having to apologize to my son because I messed up, you know,
Mhm.
and things like that. And so now you just fast forward and you kind of see. So I feel like I turned 50 years old this year. I look back and I kind of look back and I see the division within the church, the division within families, the division now in the political realm. And I feel like if I go back to my time, during COVID, and I'm really thinking about who is Jesse, like who is Jesse? Like that's what I had a lot of people tell me, like, oh, you're not married anymore, so you have to figure out, rediscover yourself now, because this is a brand new you. You shed, that's all in the past. The kids are not with you anymore. They've moved on. They're out of the house. You're not married anymore. Move on. And whenever people would be like, well, just find stuff that you like to do. Like, I understood their heart behind it, but it's kind of
Mhm.
like, I don't know I mean, what am I supposed to do? I'm used to coming home and having a house full of people and doing my thing. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And so I had to slowly like, okay, what do single, like, what do divorced people do? I don't know. You know, it was just such a weird thing. So, but it took me a while to really find, and also the COVID thing didn't help too, because I wanted to go do stuff, and but it was hard to do that. But eventually, it got easier.
Right.
But I wanted to say, like, that's kind of the thing that I saw was that um, I want to be a person that can distinguish between not only right and wrong, but between a healthy pattern and an unhealthy pattern. And I feel like I'm more aware and keen to it now than I would have been, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. In the past, I could have met somebody um, new, or go and walk inside a room or go to a church or whatever. And I'm not sitting there and I'm like, I'm observing, but I'm not really like fully understanding like what's going on. But now I feel like because of my experiences, I'm able to kind of have a better like what's the word? Like a better like like thermometer or whatever it is. Like I can kind of I've enhanced my ability to like test the spirits is like kind of really the best way I can. And so and I've been very good to be like, okay, I'll hear people talk about certain things and they'll give me their logic, and then I'll use their own logic back to them, but to them it doesn't apply to them. It's like, no, no,
Mhm.
no.
Right.
And I'm like, well, wait, hold on. Okay, now how does this apply to me but not to you? And they'll give some excuse and whatever. But it's those kind of things that like years ago it would have just, they would have said something and I'm like, oh yeah. And I think as I look back, I think there were times in my life where there were there were probably like some red flags or some things that just didn't feel right in my spirit, but because I wasn't aware or mature enough, I really didn't know what that was. And so I
Mhm.
just kind of dismissed it like, well, I'm going to trust this guy because he's older, he's a
Mhm.
minister, he's a person of authority or whatever, because
Or
we
someone
should
told me to
trust.
trust him.
Yeah,
Right.
because we should trust people.
Mhm.
But there came a point within these past, gosh, I don't know, within the past 10 years, a lot's happened in 10 years. I'm a different person now than I was 10 years ago. But
Yeah.
within these past 10 years, I feel like I've grown the courage to even face somebody in leadership. And I have done this
Mhm.
several times, whether it was in the workplace, whether it was in church. And I'd be like, excuse me. And I would say it just plainly as I am talking to right now. And I'll be like, you know what? I talked to so and so and so and so, and the reason they're not coming to church is this. Like, are you going to apologize to them? You know? And it's like, I never was a person to do that. Like that wasn't like I kind of had to learn that myself, how
Mhm.
to do that. And it's because of my compassion for people. And I feel like that's what I think a lot of people are afraid of, going back to the political spectrum, is that, you know, obviously both parties have different stand for different things, and there can be extremes on both sides, even though sometimes
Yeah.
people will only say
Mhm.
one side is more extreme than the other. But to me, like that's just, you know, I feel like if an administration is gonna use the Bible and call themselves Christians, well then, okay, like are we following the person? Does the person come before a policy, or does the policy become before the person? And I think about a group of Pharisees that are always mentioned in the New Testament. They had the Bible memorized. They went to church. They went to the synagogue. I think they had the Bible memorized, is what I was told. But they wouldn't even recognize who Jesus was. And
Right.
so that's kind of my concern, not just in the church, but also in the political realm. But even beyond that is, who are we as people? Have we forgotten why we're here in the first place? Are we more concerned about a certain law because that's what a certain president said. But do we ever stop and think like, well, what would Jesus, if he was sitting right here, how would he um, explain this whole thing? Like what's his view,
And
So
also, can different religions or beliefs coexist peacefully despite politics, because me and my Catholic friend, me and my agnostic friend, me and my atheist friend, like we can exist together and it's fine as long as we are both respecting the fact that we have different beliefs. We explain what we believe and we're not trying to change each other's minds.
yeah.
And that's what's really non-existent today is people being able to sit in the same room knowing that they believe something totally opposite and have a conversation regardless because we're just humans.
And have a
Yeah.
fruitful conversation.
Yeah. And the thought that pops in my head is kind of like, um, there's kind of that fine balance of having humility, but also standing up for what you believe in. It's
Hmm.
kind of I don't know. I think it takes wisdom and maturity to know how to balance the both, because on one hand, you just don't want to be like, well, I'm, you're just kind of whatever, and you don't really stand for anything. But on the other side, you don't want to just pick just one, like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but you kind of just lose um, your focus to even love people, because even Jesus says to love your enemies, you
Hmm.
know. So you may not agree with everything um, or with everybody, but you can at least love them. You can love your enemies. And I was always told that you love your enemies so that way they can become Christians. You know, that way they can, because it's a healing act. You know, um, and I also kind of think like as a parent, you know, we love our kids. How many times have our kids messed up? And we had to tell them, no, don't do this, no, don't do that. Here's the consequence. Here's the consequence. But we do it because we love them. Like, was there ever a time where like they did something and like, okay, you're out of here. Like, I don't love you anymore. Like, there are consequences to people's behavior and the way they act and things like that. But I think that's where um, just prayer and wisdom and what I was telling Krista just not that long ago is that as I get older, I want to hear the voice of God. I want to see people the way God sees people because it's so easy to put on to go into your church and just kind of go with the flow, whatever the church says. And not to say that they all say everything that's, I'm not saying that don't trust your leaders, anything like that. But I mean, you have to know who you are because on your last day, it's only going to be you and God. And the God's going to ask you, what did you do? Why didn't you do that? Like, it's going to be between, like, my spouse is not going to be there. My minister is not going to be there. Like, it's going to be me, and God's the one that's going to judge me. And so I feel like that's what we need to really get back to, but really just really kind of go back to really see people for how God sees people,
Hmm.
and just to have just genuine respect for one another. I love social media and I love Facebook, but it's just so easy for people to be rude to each other. And
Yeah.
like I'm a part of like different news chats and things like that, and gosh, it's just like people are just so rude, you know?
Well, and we have to love past humanity because it's not about like, like you said, loving people um, so that they will want to know about Christianity and be interested in it. People don't know what they're interested in unless they want to know about it. Are we being people who want to make them know about what we're about? Because that's the real question, at the end of the day. It's not about like whether someone believes differently. If it's more about, um, and it's not about, I need to stand up for what I believe, because a lot of people say that and they claim the Bible thumping thing and the
Hmm.
I'm standing upon the truth.
Hmm.
But standing up for what you believe, can look like that in the context of how it should look, maybe, or whatever. But to me, in in a different context, standing up for what I believe doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean speaking out loud at all against someone who has no interest in knowing what I'm about. I'm not trying to force myself and my opinions on anybody.
Hmm.
I just want them to know that I care and I'm interested to know who
Yeah.
they are and what their story is.
Sure.
And if we just look at people like that, we can love past humanity because we'll see people as unique creatures. Everybody has a story to tell. Everybody is beautifully created in the image of God, and therefore they matter. And if we look at people like that, then we stop looking at what we don't like about them and their beliefs. We start looking to try to find what is beautiful about those people. And that's where then people can come together. Even if they disagree, they also respect what I believe too, because they know I love them. If
Yeah.
they didn't know before, they definitely know now. And that's what's most important, because people don't care about listening if they don't want to listen. And if people are mean and standing on truth by lecturing them,
Right. Right.
that's just going to drive them away.
Hmm.
I want Level Up to take a different approach.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I agree.
guys, on that note, we've got about 8 minutes left. So, before we get to our last topic, if I may read this, this is from Jesse's lovely wife, Rachel. It
Oh
is her
boy.
message in a bottle. She
Oh,
says, just a quick moment to brag on how amazing my senior husband is. I am blown away by his kindness, his heart, and his amazing love for Jesus, me, our family, and Christmas lights. He just loves to serve and is such a blessing. I'm very thankful that I get to be by his side, helping him as we do life together for 50 plus years.
That's from her. That's from her.
oh,
Um, so
yeah.
as we prepare to close our session, we do want, I'm sure our listeners are wanting um, to know about the series that's going on Thursday nights that you are hosting, Jesse. What can they, and we're inviting everybody to obviously join, and that is at what, 7:30
Well,
Eastern
they can
Standard?
listen to the episode we just released on social media about immigration.
Okay,
And that was recorded with Cynthia Lopez, an immigration attorney. Um, and we've Jesse and I have started planning sessions on Thursdays to try to create something where people can come systematically one day and we can just create, a hub where people can join. So for now, we released the immigration episode that we did with Cynthia Lopez, and that's on social media, so people can find that and listen to that. And we'll definitely keep everyone in
Hmm.
touch with the plans that we're making, and we hope to make this something that's just available for the public one day, to be able to join. We want to create it well, so we just started. Be patient with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Chris and I have said, like it's kind of it's like in the works. It's like it's a making in the works, but we we're not sure exactly how it's gonna logistically look, but we basically want it to be a place where people can come talk and have it be a safe place.
sure.
It's not going to be a place where people can just lash out at each other,
Right,
and
right.
because we've already we have some people that have been interested in, in some of our talks. I've had several people say like, this is what we need. We
Yeah,
need to have civil discourse
absolutely.
without being inflammatory and accusing, accusatory, and all this negative talk. Like, I think about, like, would I win my kids over as a parent if I were to be like that? Would we, would Jesus be like, was Jesus like that with the woman at the well? You know, there's a lot of things that we can be, you know, I'm going to stand for this and whatever. But I think sometimes talking to different people with different experiences, makes you, going back to the blind spots. We all have blind spots. We all have
Mhm.
bias. And
Yep.
if we're not open and humble enough to even entertain the possibility that we could be wrong on something, um, then, you know, I think that's dangerous. And for me, again, going back to my past history, um, there's only so many things that you can control in your life and in your marriage and in your parenting and things like that. But if it's left unchecked, I mean, the consequences, um, the suffering that consequences have that could have been avoided. Could my parents' divorce been avoided? Maybe. And I won't share my opinion about what could have been different, but I have my thoughts.
Mhm.
And going back to the church division, like, are there things that we can do? Yes. I shared with Krista, like, I finally met this guy at church. I've been trying to get a hold of him, and finally I get a hold of him. He's a really smart guy, very educated. We're gonna have some talks, and I'm a moderator in a different Facebook group, and he's a really great person to have on that, because I feel like that even some small things have divided people. Oh,
Yes.
Mhm.
you don't like, you believe A, B, and C, but you don't believe in X, Y, Z. Well, then we can't fellowship with you. I'm sorry. I'm not
Yeah,
going to
you
be your
don't matter.
Right.
no. And so it's like, but okay, but wait, hold on. Like, you're just going to dismiss it just like that? And my friend from church, like, he's already told me, like, wow, like, you have a lot, like, I'm glad that I met you. Like, you have a great passion for this. Like, and I got to share, like, very similar to what I shared with you guys, a little bit more on the church side. And he was like, wow, like, you know, he was like, I wish there was more people that were passionate like that. And I think there are. I
Mhm.
think we all have it. We all have it.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
absolutely.
think sometimes things allow us to not be that way, but that's how God made us. God made us passionate. We just have to direct it and channel it in the right way.
Yeah.
So,
100% agree.
Awesome. Awesome. So we have about what 2 minutes left.
a
We hope
question.
you have enjoyed
Hmm.
meeting Jesse. I certainly have enjoyed meeting Jesse and learning more about what he's doing on Thursday nights. I'm really excited about what he's putting together, and we pray that God will have his way as he always does, because he's awesome and he's God. But in this last minute, if we can have some fun,
Okay,
I will ask you guys one more trivia question.
cool.
In the song Ode to Billy Joe, what bridge does Billy Joe McAllister jump off of? A, the Golden Gate Bridge, B, the Dames Point Bridge, C, the Tallahatchie Bridge, or D, the London Bridge?
What song is this?
The song is Ode to Billy Joe,
What,
entitled
what
What
were
are
the
the
answers?
options again?
Yeah, give the answers.
A, the Golden Gate.
In the meantime,
Yes, Krista.
is it the Tallahassee Bridge?
It is the Tallahatchie Bridge in this song
Woo!
by Bobby Gentry.
I
The
had no idea. I took an educated
1967
guess.
lyrics declare that Billy Joe McAllister, the subject of the song, jumped off the Tallahatchie Bridge. If you join us next week, trivia for this week included American history and music. Trivia for next week will be movies and action figures.
Cool.
We thank you
Oh,
guys.
oh, that sounds fun. Okay.
I'm excited. I'm excited. So never know what's going to come up.
See
But
y'all next week. I'm back with me and Marcus for Level Up Mondays.
thank you guys. See you.